So it's always a rare pleasure when something comes along that no one's ever heard of, you'd never heard of, no one was talking about. Maybe someone just suggests it to you in an offhanded fashion. And you say, why not? I'll give it a chance. How bad can it be? And it turns out to be really good. And that's definitely the case with Yellowjackets. I had never heard of this show. No one I knew has ever heard of this show. I think it's getting a bit more popular now that it's gotten such good reviews, but I didn't see anybody talking about it. I didn't see any ads for it or anything like that. And the description of it is like on the borderline of something I might watch. But a friend of mine texted me and he's like, you should try this show out. It's really good. I think you'd like it. And I just looked at it and I'm like, you know what? I just had my appendix out. I can't really move or do anything else. So let's watch Yellowjackets. And I started watching it, and from the intro, I knew it was going to be good. And I knew it was going to be something that I liked. And pretty consistently, I thought the show was amazing. I really recommend watching it. It's, if I can use kind of the cliche, it's like Breaking Bad meets Mean Girls meets Lord of the Flies, but done as like a horror thriller. And maybe that sounds like kind of a weird combination, but I think they very much make it work. Now, I'm going to try to avoid having spoilers in this because this is a show that I think really did a good job of surprising me, of having lots of twists and turns and stuff happening. And it wasn't a show where I just guessed what was going to happen like in the first 5 minutes. And throughout the show, I kept getting surprised by stuff. And that's kind of a rarity given how many things that I've watched. I can often kind of tell where something is going early on. And they definitely choreograph things, and they definitely will have Chekhov's gun, sometimes literally, and that sort of thing. But overall, I think they do a pretty good job of making things actually mysterious, ambiguous, and kind of murky. But the show is not particularly confusing. I think I need to watch it again just because it's a little bit jarring to have half the show take place in one time period and half the show take place in the other. I'm not the best at marrying the old kids with the adults, like who's who in both timelines. So I should probably rewatch the show, but I think overall it does a very good job of keeping it tight and focused with such kind of a cerebral, abstract narrative. For those of you in my audience, you might have seen in reviews that this is feminist or a feminist review of Lord of the Flies. I'm just going to say off the bat, I don't really know what they're talking about. It's just kind of a gimmick to try to sell this show to more people and make it seem woke or something like that. They seem to call anything that has female characters feminist, but I really don't get that impression at all from the show, considering like what a mess things are, how fucked up all the people involved in it are. So I don't really get how it's like a man bad, woman good thing, because there's like a lot of, I guess, derpy males, but there's a lot of insane women in it too. It just happens to be a female focused show. I don't think it really has a particular political message, despite politics being part of it. So the plot of Yellowjackets is there is a state champion team. I believe it's from New Jersey, and they're going to go to the Nationals. And everybody's super excited. They get on a plane. I think they're going to California. I forget where it is exactly. But as part of it, they're flying over Western Ontario, and their plane goes down. And their plane goes down, and the head coach and the pilot and I think some other people get killed in the crash. But the girls survive. The assistant coach survives. This one kid whose name escapes me, and Travis, who's about the same age as the girls. So they're left there. They're very much unsure what they're going to do. Do they stay by the wreck? Do they go off into the woods and try to find help? Do they try to find resources? Obviously, they don't really have that much to go on because it's not like there's some food on the plane, but it was a private jet and there really wasn't more than a couple of days food on it. And so from the very beginning, we start to get introduced to the different characters: Jackie, Shauna, my favorite character, Laura Lee, Lottie, all these different girls, and they have a pretty wide range. Some of them are like really Stacy-ish, like Jackie's really Stacy-ish. She has like the captain of the football team boyfriend. Shauna's kind of dumpy and a loser. We have one of them who's schizophrenic. We have Natalie, who is kind of a goth girl back in high school, and she's become a drug addict in her age. And you have really good personality conflicts between them that kind of carry on to the present. So the show's told in two parts. There's the present day, and then there's 1996 when the flashbacks take place. And they're very, very careful in the present to not establish who all survived the time in the wilderness. So there's some characters, and this isn't really spoilers because this happens in the first episode. So you have Taisha, Shauna, Natalie, and Misty, who all survive, and they show up in the first episode. But there's all the other girls on the team, and we really have no idea who else is there in the present. And like I said, they're very tight-lipped, so that there's a lot of tension in the past because you don't know who's going to survive and who isn't. And if they kind of let that drop at some point, it's very significant. Now, to do one kind of minor spoiler, so kind of the closest thing we have, at least in the first season, to a villain is Misty, played by Christina Ricci in the present, who does a really good job. But she's the equipment manager, and I don't know if she's a sociopath or a psychopath, but she's completely nuts and lives in her own delusional realm. And she's really happy when they crash because she has a crush on the assistant coach who loses a leg, so he's now dependent upon her physically. She also randomly knows all this survival stuff, so she kind of becomes, if not the leader, then the person everybody's turning to. Nobody likes her. They think she's a psycho and creepy, but she kind of gains this status and this power for the first time in her life. And she goes and destroys the black box that's doing the distress signal. So really there's no way for anyone to find where they are. I mean, I guess they can do flyovers or something like that, but their help is not going to come from them because of that. And Misty does that, and she obviously covers that up. And that's kind of like setting the stage for the past. And they're very careful to not tell you how they got out of that situation. Did they just walk all the way back to civilization? Did somebody find them? They don't really tell, which I think is good because it can be hard when you have a show where half of it is in flashbacks to not spoil what actually happened in the past. In the present parts of the show, they say they did horrible things. Stuff like cannibalism is strongly hinted at, but overall we don't really know. Most of the time. So in the past, they find the abandoned cabin of, I think it's the French-Canadian guy. So there's a bunch of survival stuff there. All of the food is long since gone, but there's axes, knives, there's a gun with a whole bunch of ammunition, all kinds of survival stuff, and there's also a plane, which becomes important later, but I'm not going to go into detail about that because that's a spoiler. But they have to try to figure out how to survive, so they go hunting for deer, scavenging for mushrooms and berries, and there's some dark stuff that happens later on where they get magic mushrooms, and the berries turn into extremely high-proof alcohol, and they mix that stuff together, and people go completely nuts. But it's just them kind of gradually breaking down. I think one of the big issues is that the coach, who's like the adult there, really doesn't want to assert himself. So he kind of just lets the girls do whatever they want, them run all over him. He pretends to be in a relationship with Misty, even though he's gay and he's in love with some random dude. I don't even really know who it is. But he just lets them basically run all over him. And, I mean, if he had kept them in line, I think things would have gone better. It's kind of hard because he's missing a leg, but all the same. As I said, probably my favorite character in the show is Laura Lee, who is a very, very religious Christian. What I like about this show is it doesn't portray her as being like stupid or obnoxious or anything. Her kind of spiritual presence really seems to be one of the things that holds the team together. She always makes them like say grace before meals. There's a part where she baptizes someone, and she just kind of tries to provide spiritual guidance to them, but it's portrayed in largely a positive way. And there's actually a part where they're having a seance, and it seems like someone's possessed, and she was like the only one who didn't take part in it, and she throws a Bible at the possessed person, and the demon or whatever goes away, which I thought was pretty based. But yeah, so you have the past, and then the present you have the characters who we know survived. And there's this weird, I don't know if you want to call it a conspiracy, just strange stuff starts happening. There's blackmail. There's people running ops behind the scenes. I don't really want to go into too much detail, but just weird people start showing up in the present. Weird stuff starts happening. And the girls in the present are just constantly trying to figure out what the heck's happening. And their lives are all pretty funny. Shauna, who's the main character, is basically living like a crappy life in suburbia. Although for whatever reason, her husband is way more attractive than her, and she has an affair with another guy who's way more attractive than her. So I don't really get it, but her daughter is really annoying. There's kind of a funny scene in the first couple of episodes where her daughter doesn't take the chuck roast out of the freezer. So she just goes into the garden, kills a rabbit, skids it, and they eat that for dinner, which I thought was pretty funny. Then there's Natalie, who's a former drug addict, who's just really cynical and jaded. Misty in the present, who's still around, is a nurse at an old folks home, which is very disturbing that someone like Misty would be in a position like that. And she's just completely insane, whether it comes to like killing people, blackmail, how to dispose of a body. She just knows how to do all this really shady stuff. And if they need dirty work done or they need something crazy done, Misty's just always there. She just shows up. In the last couple episodes, they because they want to get rid of her because she's a psycho, but they have to keep bringing her back to help them because they really don't have any choice because none of them are really good at that sort of thing. Kind of one of the backgrounds is Tysa is running for New Jersey State Senate. So she is a black lesbian lawyer, liberal, who has an adopted son. And she's like really afraid that she's going to lose to the white male Republican in New Jersey. And I'm just like, really? It's New Jersey. I don't think like if you're a black lesbian female, you're going to have any trouble getting elected in that state, especially when you don't present like a weirdo. So she's just like, I'm going to lose the election. And I never really got that, but maybe she's running against another Democrat. I can't imagine her being a Republican. Like, I can't. Even the New Jersey Republican Party, I don't think would run her. But that's happening, and so she's trying to become wealthy and powerful, and so people think maybe the conspiracy is involving her, and then there's some other people who are still alive. It's very ambiguous. I'm trying to be somewhat vague just so people don't figure everything out just from the way I'm talking about it. Another thing I really like is it's very careful to not show one way or another whether the supernatural exists. In a lot of shows, and this is my issue with a lot of creepypastas, is like if it's an hour-long creepypasta, like 15 minutes in, Cthulhu will show up or a ghost will show up, and it's not ambiguous at all. It's very clear that the supernatural exists. Does the supernatural exist in Yellowjackets? Probably, but in most cases, there's at least a bit of ambiguity to it. That is, can Lottie or whoever actually see the future, or are they just having delusions because of their schizophrenia? Is there actually like some cult or some weird symbol, Or is it just a bunch of hysterical girls suffering from dehydration and starvation who are just kind of seeing things that aren't there? I think, and they haven't really confirmed this, but I feel like a lot of stuff in the past might come from an unreliable narrator perspective. Like that it's not exactly what happened, it's how they remember it as happening. And kind of the trauma and the years have eroded some of it. So there's some things that seem like they're probably supernatural, but once again, while the supernatural probably exists within this world, they're very clear to not have anything so overt that it definitively proves it one way or another. And if there's supernatural aspects, they tend to just be within the realm of normal kind of things that happen to people that seem supernatural but may or may not be. They might just be very, very unlikely coincidences. So I'm really looking forward to see what they do in the next season. The last couple of episodes were a wild ride, particularly the last two were just insane. All kinds of crazy stuff happened. But I'm just really excited to see where the show's going. And I really recommend it. Don't spoil yourself. Just go in and watch the show clean. And yeah, so that's Yellowjackets. Definitely check it out.